I knocked him down when he came out of the bathroom, and I choked him.
My name is Aisha Jones. I want to apologize to the family of Norman Sullivan. Everything was a mistake. It was an accident that happened.
I accept responsibility for the role I played in Ryan's death, and I will live every day of the rest of my life attempting to redeem myself through positive actions and deeds.
Beneath calm smiles and picture-perfect fronts hid terrifying truths. These women didn't snap. They made calculated, cold-blooded choices. From Devan Schreiner's murder over custody to Nicole Blanc's mournful actions, these are the women who killed without looking back. Let's begin.
We have witnesses and we have surveillance footage.
Right, and
we always.
I said to the detective, I don't have an answer for that.
You don't have an answer. You have like zero answer. How do you think something like that could happen?
On a quiet afternoon on October 13th, 2021, the peaceful town of Longmont, Colorado, carried on with its usual rhythm. Children rode their bikes through calm streets, neighbors exchanged friendly waves, and everything seemed ordinary. But that calm was suddenly broken. A U.S. Postal Service worker, 33-year-old Jason Schaefer, was shot and killed while delivering mail. The person behind the trigger was his ex-girlfriend and the mother of his child. Jason and 27-year-old Devan Schreiner had once been in love. They shared a child and had built a life together, but over time, their relationship turned bitter. They became locked in a custody battle. Just 2 days before his murder, Jason had filed paperwork asking for primary custody of their 5-year-old child. That decision may have sealed his fate. Witnesses were stunned. A mailman was shot in broad daylight. Investigators acted quickly. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service worked closely with the Longmont police to determine who was responsible for the crime. Before long, all evidence pointed to Devan Schreiner. She had both the motive and the opportunity. Surveillance footage and phone records placed her near the scene. Within hours, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. But the case grew deeper. Authorities believed she had help. Another man named Andrew James Ritchie was accused of helping plan the murder. Prosecutors said he followed Jason during his mail route and gave Devan real-time updates, helping her set up the deadly ambush. After months of investigation and legal proceedings, Devan's trial finally began. The courtroom was quiet as prosecutors presented their case. They described a mother so desperate not to lose custody that she made a tragic decision. The jury took just 8 hours to reach a verdict. Devan Schreiner was found guilty of first-degree murder. At the center of it all was their child. Jason simply wanted more time with his son. He believed he could provide a better and more stable life, but Devan saw that as a threat. Instead of fighting in court, she chose to take his life. The judge delivered the sentence without delay. Devan Schreiner, sentenced to life in prison without the eligibility of parole. Yet, she showed no emotion for her actions. It was the mandatory punishment under Colorado law for first-degree murder. Meanwhile, Andrew Ritchie was accused of playing a key role in planning Jason's murder. He was later sentenced to life in prison without the eligibility of parole. The entire community was shaken. A federal worker had been killed while simply doing his job. For Jason's family and friends, the loss was unbearable. He was a father, a kind soul, and a man who only wanted to be present in his child's life. Justice may have been served, but no sentence can ever bring him back. Our next case is even more chaotic, where betrayal collided on a holiday no one would forget.
Everything was a mistake. It was an accident that happened.
Labor Day 2018 began like any other, a calm afternoon that gave no warning of the storm ahead. But by the end of the day, Norman Sullivan was dead, brutally shot in the head and neck, and the peaceful holiday had become a crime scene. And at the center of it all stood one name, a woman no one suspected until the truth slowly began to unravel. Initially, the details were unclear. Police responded to reports of a disturbance, and it quickly became evident that Norman Sullivan had been killed. But the question remained about who pulled the trigger. Witnesses remained quiet. The scene was chaotic. But one name kept surfacing during the investigation, and that was Aisha Jones. Investigators began piecing together what had happened. They discovered that Aisha Jones and her husband, Dominic Gillespie, knew Sullivan personally. The three individuals had reportedly been connected through substance-related interactions. Authorities discovered that on that Labor Day, the couple visited Sullivan's home to make a questionable exchange that would later have serious consequences. According to Sergeant Victor Miller of the Chattanooga Police Department, Aisha had mentioned something about a plasma card during the visit. The question was whether she went there with any intention of committing a crime or causing harm. When asked, Sergeant Miller clearly stated that there was no indication Aisha had planned to rob or kill Sullivan. Still, something went wrong. Witnesses said a fight broke out behind closed doors between Sullivan and Gillespie. The struggle spilled into the bedroom where Aisha was present, and during the chaos, a gun was fired. Norman Sullivan was struck in the head and neck. No weapon was ever recovered from the scene. However, forensic testing revealed a single particle of gunshot residue. According to a senior forensic scientist, one particle was not enough to confirm who fired the weapon, but its presence raised further questions and added more weight to the case. The evidence was not perfect. There were missing pieces, but the narrative presented in court described a situation filled with substance and fatal decisions. The jury was left to decide whether Aisha Jones had intended to kill Norman Sullivan. Some believed she acted out of fear and panic, caught in the heat of the moment. Others believed she knew exactly what she was doing. What seemed certain was that substance, pressure, and a toxic relationship had played a major part in what happened that day. After deliberating for 5 hours, the jury reached a decision. Aisha Jones was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, first-degree felony murder, especially aggravated robbery, and reckless endangerment. On April 25th, she was sentenced to life in prison. However, she showed no regret for her act. For Norman Sullivan's family, the verdict may bring some sense of justice, but no punishment can ever fill the void left behind. For Aisha Jones, a single decision changed the course of her life forever. Whether it was a tragic mistake or a conscious act, the result remains the same. One life was lost, and another was destroyed in the process. Our next case turns love into obsession. A woman who confessed to a cold and calculated murder with chilling calm.
I may be just totally off my rocker, but I was just out walking my dog, and I came across some bones that looked to me to be human.
He had been dismembered.
Oh my God.
Okay.
On a cold January afternoon in Ohio, someone taking a quiet walk through Grand Lake State Park made a discovery that would haunt the area for years. Near the shoreline, human remains were found, left out in the open as if discarded. This wasn't just a disturbing find, it was the beginning of a mystery that would take years to solve. It all began in 2015 when 21-year-old Ryan Zimmerman moved to Columbus, Ohio, hoping for a fresh start. He had been communicating online with a married couple, Naria Jenna Whitaker and her wife, Sarah Buzzard, as well as Naria's then husband, after responding to a Craigslist ad. What started as a casual conversation soon developed into something more. Eventually, Ryan was invited to live with them, entering into what could only be described as a complex four-way relationship. But what began as an unconventional arrangement quickly turned dark. Sarah's emotions spiraled out of control. The relationship caused tension between her and her husband. And before long, Sarah had decided Ryan was the reason her marriage was falling apart. On January 5th, 2016, human remains were discovered near a lake in Mercer County, Ohio. Parts of the body were missing, making identification difficult. For years, the victim's identity remained a mystery, leaving both investigators and the community searching for answers. In 2020, DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to Ryan Zimmerman. Investigators determined he was last seen on September 25, 2015. After that, he never contacted his family again. His car was later found impounded. It appeared he had simply vanished. In 2021, investigators arrested Sarah Buzzard. When they arrived at her home in Marion, Indiana, her new wife, Naria Whitaker, tragically took her own life before she could be taken into custody. Sarah eventually confessed to the unthinkable. She said that after an argument with Ryan, she knocked him down and strangled him. Even after he lost consciousness, she kept squeezing until she was sure he was dead. Then, with Whitaker's help, she dismembered the body and stuffed the pieces into bags. They didn't stop there. Sarah drove Ryan's remains around in her car, dumping parts in dumpsters and gas stations across the state. The car was sold, but later tracked down and searched by police, revealing key evidence that sealed her fate. According to prosecutors, Sarah believed Ryan had destroyed her marriage. She was furious, jealous, and spiraling emotionally. Her husband had checked into a hotel that weekend, leaving her home alone with Ryan. That's when she acted on her rage. Her confession confirmed that she blamed Ryan for everything and took matters into her own hands. In December 2021, Sarah pleaded guilty, and in January 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Her list of charges was staggering: murder, kidnapping, mistreatment of a corpse, and more. She stood in court and called herself a flawed person, but the prosecutor didn't hold back. "We're all flawed," he said, "but only one person in this room committed aggravated murder." Ryan's family waited years for answers. What they received was not justice, but tragedy. A son lost, a life destroyed, a senseless act carried out by someone he trusted. Our next case is chilling, where greed drove a woman to poison the man she once loved.
My husband's really sick. He got heat stroke yesterday, and now he's not waking up. And come on, wake up!
What's the phone number you're calling from?
In a North Dakota town, a story began that felt more like a movie than real life. A woman, a dream of a $30 million inheritance, and a betrayal so cold it tore a family apart. This is the case of Ina Thea Knoyer and how she poisoned the man she claimed to love. It all began in early September 2023. Ina Knoyer, 48, had been in a long-term relationship with Stephen Edward Riley Jr., a 51-year-old father and brother who believed he was about to receive a massive inheritance worth $30 million. Stephen was excited. He was planning to meet an attorney at the Minot airport to finalize everything, but instead of celebrating, everything took a dark turn. Stephen suddenly became seriously ill on the day of the meeting. Ina told others he was suffering from heat stroke and brought him home to rest. She even claimed he had visited a clinic the next day, but there was no record of any visit. Stephen's condition continued to worsen. On September 5th, Stephen was rushed to the hospital unconscious. He never regained consciousness and passed away later that day. His friends and family immediately raised concerns. They remembered that Ina had made disturbing comments in the past about poisoning Stephen with antifreeze. Even before doctors revealed anything, Ina was already telling people Stephen had been poisoned. An autopsy confirmed the suspicion. Stephen had toxic levels of ethylene glycol in his system, a chemical found in antifreeze. The poison had been mixed into the drinks Ina gave him. At their home, police found a beer bottle, a mug, and even an old Windex container with traces of the same toxic substance. As investigators dug deeper, the motive became clear. Ina knew about the supposed inheritance, but Stephen, according to friends, had plans to end the relationship once he received the money. However, she believed that if Stephen died, she might be able to collect the money. But it was all based on a lie. Investigators later said there was no real evidence that the inheritance ever existed. The man Stephen had been communicating with was never identified. Despite this, Ina poisoned him and kept him from receiving medical help in time. Greed was at the heart of it all. Ina believed she was about to become a millionaire. She even said she would split the money with Stephen's son. But when investigators told her she would receive nothing, her attitude changed. That was when the truth began to unfold. On October 30th, 2023, Ina was arrested and charged with murder. Yet, she showed no remorse for her actions. She first pleaded not guilty, then changed her plea. In May 2024, she accepted a deal: 50 years in prison. She would serve 25 years, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to Stephen's grieving family. Stephen's sister and son gave emotional statements in court. His sister Stephanie said their 71-year-old mother would now live the rest of her life in sorrow. Through tears, she called Ina a person with no soul and said the punishment would never feel like enough. Stephen's son Ryan said the loss had devastated their entire family. He had just started to rebuild a relationship with his father. Now, that chance was gone forever. He said he could not find words strong enough to describe the pain. When asked to speak, Ina remained silent. No apology, no expression, no remorse. Our next case is a pure nightmare where jealousy turned lethal and a man was killed in his sleep.
Human beings make mistakes, but you did not accidentally murder my father.
On a cold January day in Sandown, New Hampshire, a quiet neighborhood woke up to news that would shake the entire community. A man was found dead in his home, shot in the head while he slept. And the person responsible is someone he once loved. This is the heartbreaking case of Nicole Blanc and the murder of her ex-boyfriend, Richard Mannion Jr. Nicole Blanc and Richard Mannion had a troubled past. Their relationship had already ended, and Nicole had even been charged with assaulting him the previous summer. That led to a no-contact order, but even with legal boundaries in place, Nicole refused to let go. On January 14th, Nicole entered Richard's home while he was sleeping in his bedroom. She picked up a pistol and aimed it at his head. The first time she pulled the trigger, the gun didn't fire, but instead of walking away, she cocked the weapon and tried again. This time, the bullet fired and killed 43-year-old Richard instantly. Nicole didn't confess immediately, but what she didn't know was that one of her friends, Dennis Johnson, was working with law enforcement. He wore a wire during a lunch meeting, and Nicole confessed everything, how she planned the murder, and how she carried it out. In court, Nicole finally admitted the truth. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Her chilling confession shocked the courtroom. But the most emotional moment came when Richard's family members stood to speak. Though Nicole never gave a clear reason, prosecutors believed she simply couldn't accept that their relationship was over. Even with a no-contact order in place, she chose conflict instead of walking away. And that choice cost a man his life. The judge called Nicole a coward and a callous murderer. He accepted the plea deal, but made it clear that justice had to be served. Nicole Blanc was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison. The courtroom sat in silence as the judge told her she deserved every day of this sentence. Richard Mannion's sister, Cindy, spoke through tears. She said their lives would never be the same, and that Nicole had never considered how her actions would affect the victim's family and friends. Next up, a woman who used jealousy as a weapon. Sharon Graham didn't just want her ex gone. She convinced someone else to do the dirty work for her.
She's just an evil woman, as far as I'm concerned. To take someone's life like that and plan it and execute it.
A grandmother with a secret, a man betrayed in the most horrific way imaginable, and a crime so gruesome it shocked seasoned detectives. Sharon Graham's story isn't just one of greed, it's one of calculated, cold-blooded murder. Her target? Her ex-partner Bruce Saunders, whose kindness and trust would ultimately seal his fate. The tool? A wood chipper in a crime scene straight out of a nightmare. But how did Sharon, who seemed like an unassuming woman, mastermind such a brutal act? And how did her plan unravel? This case is as shocking as it is unforgettable.
Tonight, for the first time, what really happened in the so-called wood chipper murder.
We believe that man has been put in that machine, and it's foul play.
Bruce Saunders thought he was helping a friend in need. In November 2017, he agreed to assist Sharon Graham and her two acquaintances, Greg Roser and Peter Koenig, in clearing debris from a property in Goomboorian, Queensland. But what Bruce didn't realize was that he had walked straight into a deadly trap. What began as an ordinary day quickly descended into horror. As Bruce worked, Roser and Koenig attacked him, bludgeoning him with a metal bar. Sharon Graham wasn't at the scene, but her presence loomed over everything. She had orchestrated it all, manipulating the two men to carrying out her chilling plan. The motive? Greed. Sharon stood to gain $750,000 from Bruce's life insurance policy. She had convinced her accomplices that the payout would be worth the risk, using manipulation and lies to push them to commit murder. To cover their tracks, they staged Bruce's death as an accident. His body was fed into a wood chipper, reducing him to little more than fragments. The scene was so gruesome that even the most seasoned emergency responders were left shaken. But what investigators found next would expose Sharon's web of lies and unravel her deadly scheme.
But the police did doubt Sharon Graham's story, and when you hear what was really going on, it's no wonder why. You see, Sharon was living with Bruce Saunders at the time of his death, but she was also in a relationship with Greg Rosa and a third man, Peter Koenig.
Initially, it seemed like the perfect crime. Bruce's death was reported as a tragic accident, a man simply caught in the machinery. But investigators noticed something unusual. Bruce's body didn't show the kind of injuries consistent with an accidental fall into the wood chipper. A closer examination revealed signs of a struggle. Blood spatter patterns suggested Bruce had been struck before his body was placed in the machine. Suspicion fell on Sharon, Greg, and Peter when inconsistencies emerged in their stories. Sharon's calm demeanor during questioning was unnerving. She claimed to be devastated by Bruce's death, yet her phone records told a different story. Just hours after the murder, she texted Greg and Peter, reminding them to stick to their story. The final piece of the puzzle came from a witness, a local farmer who had seen Greg and Peter acting suspiciously near the property on the day of Bruce's death. Armed with this testimony, detectives arrested all 3 suspects.
During a search of Rosa's property, police uncovered 2 notes written by Rosa, which detailed a previous plan to murder Bruce Saunders.
During the trial, the horrifying details of Sharon's scheme were laid bare. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of her as the mastermind, using manipulation and greed to drive the 2 men to commit murder. Greg Rosa, who had wielded the metal bar, pleaded guilty and received a life sentence. Peter Koenig, who assisted in the attack, also faced life in prison. Sharon Graham's trial became a media sensation. Her cold, calculating demeanor in court shocked those following the case. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict, the judge didn't hold back, sentencing her to life in prison without parole. He called her actions a premeditated act of pure evil.
And the day I found out he was murdered, I couldn't believe it because he's such a nice person. And why people would do that for money.
In the courtroom, Bruce Saunders' friends and family could barely contain their heartbreak. He had been a kind and generous man, trusting the wrong person in Sharon Graham. To those who loved him, her betrayal wasn't just shocking, it was utterly unfathomable. She didn't just kill Bruce, she destroyed everyone who cared about him. The judge called the crime one of the most horrific he had ever presided over, emphasizing the profound impact it had on the community. For investigators, the case served as a chilling reminder of how greed can drive people to commit unimaginable acts of cruelty. Sharon's life sentence confirms she will never harm anyone again. But for Bruce's loved ones, the pain of his brutal death and the betrayal by someone he trusted will linger forever. Our next case stunned the nation. Susan Smith claimed her children were kidnapped, but the truth was far more horrifying.
God gives us free choice, and she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do.
On October 25, 1994, Susan Smith called the police in Union, South Carolina, with a heart-wrenching claim. She said a man had carjacked her vehicle, taking her 2 young sons, 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alexander, with him. The world was captivated as Susan appeared on national TV, tearfully begging for her children's safe return. For 9 long days, the nation watched and waited, clinging to the hope that Susan Smith's 2 little boys, Michael and Alexander, would be found safe. Susan, their heartbroken mother, appeared on television, pleading tearfully for their return. Her sorrow seemed genuine, and the world rallied behind her. But behind the grief-stricken face lay a disturbing secret. From the very beginning, investigators sensed something wasn't right. They carefully analyzed Susan's story and found key inconsistencies. One glaring issue was her description of the supposed carjacking. Susan claimed she had been stopped at a red light in an empty intersection when a man forced her out of the car and drove off with her children. However, investigators quickly realized the traffic light wouldn't have turned red unless another vehicle had been present, something Susan never mentioned.
Susan Smith is convicted for their deaths and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
As the pressure mounted, Susan broke down and confessed. The heartbreaking truth emerged. She had driven her car to John D. Long Lake with her sons strapped in their car seats. She let the car roll into the water, drowning her children. Her shocking motive is that she wanted to start a new life with a wealthy man who didn't want kids. It was a revelation that shattered the nation. The discovery of Michael and Alexander's bodies in the lake left the nation heartbroken. For days, people had hoped the little boys would be found safe. But that hope was shattered when their lifeless bodies were recovered from the depths of John D. Long Lake. Susan Smith's car, submerged 122 feet from the shore, became a haunting symbol of the crime. When questioned, Susan claimed she had been overwhelmed by emotional pain and insisted she hadn't planned to harm her children. Her confession shocked everyone who had watched her tearful public pleas just days before. In 1995, Susan's trial gripped the nation. Her defense team described her as a deeply troubled woman battling severe depression, trying to explain how a mother could commit such a terrible act. They argued she wasn't thinking clearly and was overwhelmed by despair. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture. They claimed Susan's actions were calculated, motivated by her desire to pursue a relationship with a man who didn't want children. After hearing all the evidence, it took the jury just 2.5 hours to reach a verdict: guilty of 2 counts of murder.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children.
Though prosecutors sought the death penalty, the jury sentenced Susan to life in prison with the chance of parole after 30 years. She remains incarcerated at the Leith Correctional Institution, where her 2024 parole request was denied.
Has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander.
As the judge announced Susan's sentence, a profound sense of shame clouded her features. Her voice trembled as she spoke, acknowledging the horribleness of her actions. With a tear-streaked face, she admitted how deeply remorseful she felt for what she had done, especially to her children. Her hands clenched as if holding on to the remnants of the guilt that weighed her down.
And I love Michael and Alex with all my heart.
The case of Susan Smith is a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of a desperate mind. It's a story that still stirs deep sorrow and outrage, leaving a scar on the hearts of all who remember.
Now she wants a chance to be free after only serving 30 years. No. Life should mean life.
The Susan Smith case shook the nation's trust to its core, but the next case reveals a reckless action that forever changed lives. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description.
Or you're stone cold sober and you have a seizure every single day, and yet you still choose to get in a car and drive. I honestly don't know which one is worse.
On August 10th, 2017, a tragic crash occurred on the Leroy-Shellman Expressway in Tampa, Florida. That day, Louise and Rita Philippak, along with their 8-year-old daughter Georgia, lost their lives in an accident that shook the community. At the center of this devastation was 31-year-old Amber Pereira, whose actions would forever alter countless lives. On a tragic night, Amber Pereira was speeding down the road in her Kia, driving at an alarming 120 miles per hour. In a split second, she collided with the back of the Philippak family's Hyundai, sending their car spinning across the median into oncoming traffic. The car crashed into 2 other vehicles before bursting into flames. Sadly, the Philippak family, 3 members in total, lost their lives at the scene. Another driver was also injured in the chaos. Instead of stopping to offer help, Amber continued driving, not realizing the gravity of what had just happened. She drove for 2 more miles before her car broke down. When authorities caught up with her, they discovered that Amber's blood alcohol level was far above the legal limit, and there were also traces of cannabis in her system. This devastating accident took the lives of an entire family and left another person severely injured. The consequences of Amber's reckless actions would be felt by everyone who loved the Philippak family, and the community was left in shock over the preventable tragedy. It serves as a sobering reminder of how driving under the influence can lead to irreversible, heartbreaking consequences.
Moments ago, Amber Pereira found out how long she'll spend in prison for killing a family in a deadly crash.
During the investigation, Amber Pereira tried to explain the crash by claiming she had suffered a seizure just before the collision. However, the evidence told a different story. Data from her car's recorder revealed that she had made several attempts to steer and avoid the impact, suggesting she was fully aware of what was happening at the time. After the crash, Amber was taken to the hospital, but even there, she tried to hide blood samples in an attempt to avoid further legal trouble. Her actions only added to the growing mountain of evidence against her. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Amber's reckless driving, under the influence of alcohol and substances, had led to the tragic deaths of 3 innocent people and the serious injury of another. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Amber finally pleaded guilty to 9 charges, including 3 counts of DUI manslaughter and leaving the scene of a crash involving death. Her guilty plea marked the beginning of a long legal battle, but the consequences of her actions were already painfully clear. This tragedy serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating impact of impaired driving and the importance of being responsible behind the wheel.
The emotion got the best of Amber Pereira throughout the 3-hour hearing. At times, she dropped her head into her hands in despair.
On October 22, 2019, Circuit Judge Christopher Sabella sentenced Pereira to 50 years in prison. While her attorney argued for leniency, citing her minimal criminal history, the judge and the victim's family felt justice demanded a harsher sentence.
Sentenced the 31-year-old to 5 decades behind bars.
Your life is ruined, but you also ruined a lot of lives and ended 3 lives.
As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, a wave of emotion swept over Amber, her heart heavy with guilt. The weight of each sentence sank deep into her soul, and tears began to fall. Every word seemed to magnify her regret, the burden of her actions pressing down on her more than ever.
Moments ago, Amber Pereira found out how long she'll spend in prison for killing a family in a deadly crash.
This tragic story leaves a lasting impact, reminding us of the irreversible consequences of reckless decisions. For the Filipek family, no sentence could bring back their loved ones. For Pereira, her life is now a stark reflection of the cost of one fateful choice.
Not going to make it through the crash, and that my children were going to lose their mother.
Amber's reckless driving highlights how quickly tragedy can strike. But the next story takes manipulation and betrayal to an even darker level.
Because of a prison writing group saying that deflecting blame was a coping mechanism.
On May 1st, 1990, Pamela Smart returned to her New Hampshire home to find her condo ransacked and her husband, Gregory Smart, brutally murdered. To everyone around her, Pamela appeared to be a grieving widow, shocked by the apparent burglary gone wrong. However, the police soon unraveled a chilling truth hidden behind her composed exterior. At the age of 22, Pamela found herself in a complicated relationship with a much younger Billy Flynn, who was only 15 years old. Billy, feeling deeply connected to Pamela, was manipulated by her into doing something he never imagined. Pamela, in a bid to end her unhappy marriage, convinced Billy that her love depended on him taking drastic action. She told him she would withhold affection unless he helped her remove her husband, Gregory, from the picture. Billy, overwhelmed by his emotions, turned to his 3 friends for assistance. Together, they hatched a plan, and one fateful night, Billy shot Gregory while one of his friends, Randall, held him down. The scene initially appeared as though a robbery had gone wrong, but as detectives pieced together the details, they started to see a different story. A breakthrough came when Pamela's co-worker, Cecilia Pierce, stepped in to help. Wearing a wire, Cecilia recorded Pamela's own words, which revealed the truth behind the crime. This critical evidence helped investigators uncover the shocking truth and brought Pamela's manipulation to light, leading to her eventual arrest.
Well, we went upstairs, Pete and I, and right into Pam's room. We started dumping out the drawers and everything, so it looked like a burglary.
Pamela's trial grabbed the attention of the entire nation because it was one of the first in U.S. history to allow cameras in the courtroom. The prosecutors argued that Pamela was a manipulative person who used her charm to control a vulnerable teenager, Billy Flynn. They claimed she wanted to avoid a messy divorce and take advantage of her husband's $140,000 life insurance policy. Pamela's defense team argued that she didn't know about the murder plot and had no part in it. However, the recordings made by her co-worker, Cecilia, and the testimonies from Billy and his friends told a different story. These pieces of evidence showed that Pamela had played a big role in planning the crime. After a trial that lasted 14 days, the jury found Pamela guilty of being an accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with no chance of ever being released. Pamela's case became a cautionary tale about manipulation and the dangerous consequences of taking advantage of others.
Is that Cecilia Pierce and Bill Flynn are having all these conversations about the murder of your husband, which you know absolutely nothing about. Is that it?
Yes, they testified to that also.
To this day, Pamela maintains her innocence, claiming she never wanted her husband dead. However, her life behind bars has been tumultuous. From enduring a violent assault by fellow inmates to being the subject of media documentaries, Pamela remains a controversial figure. In March 2023, her last appeal for a sentence reduction was denied, sealing her fate to live out her days in prison. During the whole trial, Pamela showed no remorse for her act.
Who is from New Hampshire, is serving a life sentence without parole for plotting with a 15-year-old to kill her husband back in 1990. William Flynn served a 25-year sentence for the shooting death.
Was killing your husband one of those mistakes?
No, it wasn't.
Acknowledge for the first time in my own, mind and my own heart how responsible I was.
Along with it, Billy also gets emotional and says sorry to Gregory's family for what he did. The story of Pamela Smart left many in shock and disbelief.
I felt a tremendous amount of shame.
The case serves as a grim reminder of the devastating consequences of manipulation, betrayal, and blind infatuation. While Gregory's life was tragically cut short, the ripple effects of his crime continue to haunt everyone involved. Pamela Smart's cunning manipulation left lives in ruins, but the next case unveils a chilling story of betrayal that cuts even deeper.
You've caused untold damage to our lives, yours, and others.
On November 14, 2020, the quiet town of Casco Township in Allegan County was rocked by a horrifying discovery. A charred vehicle, near which lay the burned remains of 25-year-old David Silverlight, was found. What initially seemed like a tragic accident quickly turned into a murder investigation that unveiled dark secrets and a deadly conspiracy. David Silverlight, a resident of the South Haven area, had once been in a relationship with Allison Martin. Although their romantic relationship had ended, Allison's connection to David remained in unexpected ways. When David's body was discovered, burned and abandoned, police quickly suspected something was wrong. It didn't seem like an accident, and they soon began looking into the people who were closest to him. As the investigation unfolded, authorities began to suspect Allison and her friend Justin Terpstra were involved. The two were eventually linked to the crime, and it became clear that something far darker had taken place. Allison, at 23 years old, and Justin, at 25, were both arrested and charged with open murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The charges they faced were serious, as they carried the chance of life in prison. The community was shocked by the crime, and the case would later be a reminder of how even familiar relationships can sometimes take a dangerous turn. Investigators continued their work to understand the full story behind David's tragic death. The investigation into David Silverlight's death uncovered some truly unsettling details. Just 4 days after his body was found, it was confirmed that David had been murdered. It turned out that Allison Martin and her friend Justin Terpstra had made a deadly plan together. They decided to kill David and try to hide the evidence by burning his body along with his car. The news of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving many in disbelief that something so tragic could happen so close to home. David's family was heartbroken, struggling to understand why anyone would harm him. As the case moved forward, it became even more difficult to process. During the preliminary hearings, Allison was evaluated and found to be mentally fit to stand trial. This development added even more weight to the case, as it became clear that the crime had been carefully planned and carried out. The community, along with David's loved ones, hoped for justice as they watched the case unfold. The shocking events served as a reminder of how quickly relationships can turn dark, and how important it is to stay vigilant about the people we trust.
The life sentence without parole was prescribed by law, so today's hearing is mostly a chance for Brandon Silverlight's family to vent their anger on the woman they say.
Allison's preliminary hearing concluded that there was enough evidence to move the case to trial. Although Justin's hearing was delayed due to competency evaluations, both defendants would eventually face the full extent of the law for their heinous crime. At the time of the hearing, Allison gets emotional and starts crying. This case is a haunting reminder of how relationships, when marred by conflict and malice, can take a dark turn. David's tragic death left a void in his loved ones' lives, while the community of Casco Township was left grappling with the horror of what had unfolded in their midst. Justice for David now lies in the hands of the courts, but the emotional scars left behind will take far longer to heal.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy, really friendly, outgoing. He was really into playing drums. I believe he played with the University of Western Michigan marching band. He also taught marching percussion to high school students, and that was really one of his passions.
Next, we examine the case of Hannah Payne, a seemingly ordinary citizen whose decision to take justice into her own hands led to a fatal encounter with life-altering consequences.
Hannah Payne's eyes filled with tears as Clayton County Judge Jules Scott gave the convicted killer life for the malice murder charge.
We head to Clayton County, where Hannah Payne, a 25-year-old woman from Georgia and, according to the court, tried covering up her crime with the most ridiculous lie ever told. Payne allegedly took it upon herself to administer justice on the 62-year-old Kenneth Herring. In the month of May 2019, Mr. Herring had hit a trailer that was carrying legal firearms, and without notifying the police, he drove off. Hannah Payne, who was nearby, saw this incident and decided to follow Mr. Herring for about a mile before pulling him over. She called 911 to report this issue, and over the phone she was heard yelling at Mr. Herring. She eventually shot him and claimed that he took her gun and shot himself with it. Payne was more or less a passerby in this case. She could have called the police and waited for them to arrive before reporting the case. She decided to take matters into her own hands by playing the role of a police officer, and this landed her in huge trouble. It was later reported in the news from 11 Alive News that the reason Mr. Herring had fled from the scene where he hit the trailer was because he was in the middle of a medical emergency, likely a diabetic shock. Miss Payne was charged to court where she was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after she was found guilty on all counts of felony murder, malice murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm, and false imprisonment earlier in the week according to WSB TV. During the hearing, Miss Payne lied against the deceased, claiming he grabbed her and mashed on the brake in an attempt to get her off. Furthermore, she claimed that at some point, Herring started revving his engine and pulled away from the scene of the initial crash. In her testimony, she stated that she was speaking with a 911 dispatcher at the time, who inquired as to whether she had managed to obtain his license plate number. She claimed that she got in her car as soon as she realized she hadn't, and assumed no one else had either. Terry Robinson, the man she thought was the state cop, instructed her to go, implying that he wanted her to follow Herring. She testified in court. 4 years later, another trial was held. The family of the 62-year-old Kenneth Herring say they have been waiting 4 years for that day. The sisters of the deceased were emotional after coming out of the courtroom. They waited 4 years to get justice for their brother. Vicki Lynn Herring, Kenneth's youngest sister, emotionally expressed the profound impact of her brother's loss.
I no longer have a big brother. His grandchildren won't know him. He has 2 adult children that they don't have a father anymore. There were 6 of us. Now there's the 5 of us that are left.
Jacqueline Herring, another sister, fondly remembered her brother as someone who would playfully boss around his siblings.
Where he got a life without parole, I would like for her to have life without parole.
Rena Novotny, a friend of the Paynes, spoke in defense of Hannah, sharing the emotional struggles she has faced, especially when dealing with cancer in her family. Despite the national attention the case garnered, Clayton County District Attorney Tasha Mosley clarified that she doesn't believe the murder was race-related. Mosley called the sentence a success, pointing out that Payne would still serve a minimum of 43 years without the chance of release. After days of testimony in a Clayton County courtroom, prosecutors and Hannah Payne's defense attorney had one final chance on Tuesday to make their case to the jury before deliberations got underway. In 2019, Payne was accused by prosecutors of playing cop when they claimed she pursued 62-year-old Kenneth Herring from the site of an accident in which she had no direct involvement. Throughout the trial, jurors heard a lot, including 911 calls and Payne's interview with the police, among other things. Payne's and other witnesses' evidence was also heard by them. Payne testified at the murder trial on her own behalf. She claimed to have witnessed the first crash, which included the presence of a state officer. She asserted that the witness at the scene and the officer informed her directly that Herring was drunk. The defense contends that Payne acted in self-defense because she alleges Herring began hitting her after she confronted him. Tucker claims that Payne was only attempting to assist after seeing a collision. During Tuesday afternoon's state closing statements, the lead prosecutor stated, Kenneth Herring, who was unarmed and minding his own business, was chased down, detained, shot, and murdered. After listening to Payne's statement, her lawyer was given an opportunity for a redirect examination. The lesson to be learned in this is very clear, and that is minding one's business and not taking laws into our own hands. Let the cops do their work. If Miss Payne had gone about her day, she wouldn't have landed herself in this hot mess. Mr. Kenneth Herring, an innocent man, shouldn't have died the way he did, no matter what. Miss Payne deserves her sentence of life in prison with the possibility of release. Even the general public's response favors the court. Some even prayed for Payne's offenses to carry a harsher sentence. Together, let's dive into this intriguing story and unravel the mystery as to why this Karen would take her neighbor's life.
The video released tonight confirms that the deadly confrontation between Susan Lorenz and A.J. Owens was far from their first encounter. Now, take a look. The video shows Marion County deputies talking with Lorenz several times on separate occasions after she called in complaints. Now, in one case, she called to report that Owens' children were being loud outside while she was working.
Lorenz is a 58-year-old white woman, and she lives right next to the family of the Owens. Mrs. Ajike Owens is a 35-year-old woman and a mother of 4 children. Before the death of Mrs. Owens, Lorenz had called the police multiple times on different occasions complaining about the Owens, her children, and other neighbors. Her complaints were about trespassing, noise from the neighbors, and to the kids calling her a Karen. Lorenz claimed that she had been bullied by the children. She told the deputy that she doesn't want to feel intimidated or get yelled at by them, screaming and yelling at her, telling her that she's a calling her Karen. This was seen in video late August 2022. Lorenz would always tell the parents that there are other places their children can play, and in return the parents would tell her the kids aren't hurting anyone or causing any damage. There have been several videos showing where Lorenz was seen yelling at the kids, with insensitive remarks and hurtful words. 6 children attested to the fact that Lorenz had been aggressive towards the Owens, yelling profanities and hurtful words at them. Other neighbors also reported extreme acts of intolerance exhibited by Lorenz, such as getting in her car and revving it in retaliation when children and barking dogs bothered her, and parking her truck near areas where the children were playing and setting off her car alarm. Also in November 2022, on a recorded phone call, Lorenz was heard calling her neighbors hooligans. What broke the backbone of it all happened on the 2nd of June. Ajike went up to the Ocala home of Lorenz after learning that she had been to Ajike's house and took the kid's iPad and threw roller skates at them. After several knocks from Ajike and no response, Lorenz shot AJ through the closed door and AJ died. Susan Louise Lorenz was charged with manslaughter with a firearm, culpable negligence, violence, and 2 counts of assault, and was identified as Owens' killer. On July 11th, she pleaded not guilty. Authorities stated that they wanted to ascertain what part Florida's Stand Your Ground laws played in the shooting before ordering Lorenz's arrest 4 days after the incident. According to the Marion County Sheriff's Office, Owens and her neighbor had a recurring argument about her kids crossing her property. Officials stated that Owens' children had been playing in a field close to the shooter's residence before the shooting started. One of the kids dropped his iPad on the floor, and the suspect is said to have snatched it. Mr. Diaz told MSNBC, "The white woman had it, would not give it back to my grandson," adding that the suspect was allegedly using profanity. Like any other child, he went home to tell his mother, "My daughter just knocked on the door." Police were notified by witnesses that the suspect had reportedly thrown roller skates at Owens' children, which prompted the mother of 4 to confront her at her door. Lorenz even went as far as telling the deputy that she is like the perfect neighbor and does not bother anyone at all. Lorenz, who stated she shot Owens out of fear for her life, has not had murder charges brought against her by Florida authorities. Rather, she faces 1 charge of assault and 1 count of manslaughter with a handgun. According to Florida State Attorney William Bill Gladson, Lorenz did not demonstrate the depraved mind necessary to distinguish second-degree murder from manslaughter under state statutes. Depraved mind requires evidence of hatred, spite, ill will, or evil intent toward the victim at the time of the killing, Gladson said. As deplorable as the defendant's actions were in this case, there is insufficient evidence to prove the specific and required elements of second-degree murder. Lorenz could actually face up to 30 years in prison. A judge granted a $154,000 bond with the condition that she wear an ankle monitor and stay away from the Owens family. This case, however, begs the question of whether or not this Floridian jury acted out of prejudice or was just in giving their verdict, considering the evidence tendered. Also, could Lorenz's action have been seen as just a defensive act or violence in an unreasonable circumstance? Our next case looks like a simple family tragedy until Isabella Martinez made decisions that shattered trust forever.
I don't need an attorney.
You don't need an attorney?
No.
Well, I beg to disagree with you. You have a right to represent yourself. In our Constitution, you have a right to represent yourself.
On July 6, 2017, a chilling 911 call was made from a home in Loganville, Georgia. When Gwinnett County Police arrived at the scene, they found a tragic sight: 5 lives lost. The victims included her husband, Martin Romero, 33, and their 4 children: Isabella, 10, Dakota, 7, Dylan, 4, and Axel, 2. A 5th child, Diana, 9, had also been stabbed but survived after undergoing emergency surgery. The Romero family had recently moved into a quiet neighborhood in Loganville, Georgia. By all accounts, they seemed like a happy and close-knit family. The children were often seen playing with friends and were described by neighbors as bright and full of potential. However, beneath this peaceful appearance, tragedy was brewing. Isabella Martinez, the mother, reportedly sank into a deep depression after the death of her father, which seemed to change everything. On July 16, 2017, the unimaginable happened. Isabel made a 911 call admitting she had stabbed her husband and children. When police arrived, they found 5 family members dead and another child, Diana, critically injured but alive. The shock didn't end there. During her first court appearance, Isabel behaved in ways that puzzled everyone. She smiled for the cameras, gave a double thumbs up, and even knelt in a prayer-like pose. Her actions baffled the court and viewers alike. The judge sternly told her to stop, but she shook her head and laughed. When asked about legal representation, Isabel refused an attorney, saying her faith and the people would defend her. It was a chilling display in a case that left a community heartbroken and searching for answers.
A Georgia prosecutor will not seek the death penalty for a woman charged with stabbing her husband and 4 children to death. 34-year-old Isabel Martinez pled not guilty to all charges in a Gwinnett County courthouse today.
The police quickly launched a thorough investigation after the devastating discovery in Loganville. They uncovered that Isabel Martinez had brutally stabbed her family in the early hours of the morning. Shockingly, she confessed to the crimes without hesitation. However, what happened in the courtroom left everyone even more baffled. During her sentencing, Isabel's behavior was nothing short of bizarre. She smiled, waved to the cameras, and even gave a double thumbs up.
Smiling the creepiest smile, gave the jury a thumbs up, and started moving as if she was praying.
She swayed in her seat, held her hands together in a prayer gesture, and appeared completely detached from the severity of the situation. Her strange reactions unsettled everyone present, including the judge, who had to warn her to stop performing for the cameras. Many people began to question what could have driven her to commit such a horrific act. Some experts speculated that Isabel might have been struggling with severe mental health issues, perhaps triggered by the recent loss of her father. Others were left wondering how such an unimaginable tragedy could happen in a seemingly normal, happy family.
I just went cold. I couldn't believe that what had happened. I mean, when they said that there had been a tragedy, I thought maybe a car accident or something.
After a thorough trial where she showed bizarre reactions to her act, Isabel Martinez was convicted of 5 counts of murder, aggravated assault, and child cruelty. She received a life sentence with the chance of parole plus 21 years.
To cut out the display for the cameras,
The loss devastated the community, leaving family, friends, and neighbors grappling with an unimaginable tragedy. The surviving child, Diana, faced a long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. For many, this case serves as a stark reminder of the hidden pain that can lead to unimaginable actions. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. Isabel's brutal attack on her family is impossible to forget. The next case shows the tragic loss of a daughter, leaving us questioning a mother's unimaginable actions.
Just be careful and watch out who you're talking to and watch out who's around you and be suspicious of everything.
On a cold November day in 2014, a tragedy unfolded in Nashua, New Hampshire that would leave a lasting impact on the community. Caitlin Marin, a 27-year-old mother, was convicted of killing her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage. The details of the case were so heart-wrenching that they would haunt everyone involved. Brielle Gage was a sweet, innocent little girl whose life ended far too soon. During Thanksgiving week in 2014, she suffered severe injuries that took her life, leaving her family and community devastated. At first, her mother, Caitlin Marin, claimed that Brielle had fallen down the stairs, but the truth was far more heartbreaking. Investigators soon uncovered a different story, revealing that Brielle had been subjected to unimaginable mistreatment. She had been kicked, punched, and even slammed against a wall. The injuries on her small body told a harrowing tale. Over 50 bruises and wounds showed just how much she had endured. Prosecutors explained that Marin's anger had spiraled out of control. They said she became enraged when Brielle had wet herself and later went to the kitchen at night to find food. What should have been simple moments of childhood became the trigger for a violent outburst.
You just can't keep the story straight. The only person afraid of the truth is her, Judge. And why? Because the truth is she's a killer.
Despite all the evidence, Marin insisted she was innocent. She chose to stand trial without a jury, putting her fate in the hands of a judge. The tragic loss of Brielle and the circumstances surrounding her death left the community in shock. During the trial, Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeff Strelzin painted a grim picture of Caitlin Marin, calling her a skilled and manipulative liar. He explained how Marin had carefully tried to cover her tracks, but the truth of what happened to her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage, could not be hidden. The courtroom was heavy with sorrow as the details of Brielle's slow and painful death were revealed. Prosecutors shared how the little girl suffered more than 50 injuries, leaving everyone in shock and disbelief. Among those present was Martin's mother, Kathleen Emery. She bravely spoke to the court, her voice filled with heartbreak and sorrow. Kathleen expressed her deep pain, not only for the loss of her beloved granddaughter, but also for her daughter, Caitlin. She mourned the reality that Caitlin would now spend the rest of her life behind bars, far from the life she once knew.
Mom says, no, Ma, don't touch her, don't talk to her. Her doctor said when she cries for no reason, you can't acknowledge her.
The tragedy of Brielle's death left a lasting impact on everyone. In December 2016, Marin was found guilty of second-degree murder. Judge Charles S. Temple sentenced her to 45 years to life in prison. He called Brielle's death horrific and expressed hope that her tragic story would serve as a wake-up call for society to better protect its children, while Marin showed no remorse.
I feel sorry. This is the rest of her life in prison.
Judge Temple called Brielle's death horrific.
And they say while she did talk to police before she was read her rights.
That's why when you get to the station, you don't tell her, you don't have to talk to me.
No.
And that's why you don't make any efforts to provide to her a phone to contact her attorney.
Brielle's death was a devastating reminder of how fragile and precious life is, especially for children. It sparked changes in child protection laws in New Hampshire, ensuring that Brielle's suffering would not be in vain. Though justice was served, the community will forever mourn the loss of a little girl whose life was stolen far too soon.
Pray for her family, for her siblings, because they have to live through it.
Caitlin's ruthless murder shocked the community. The next case shows an unspeakable cruelty that took us into a tragedy that took 2 young lives.
I just received a call from my child's mother that 2 of my youngest 2 dead babies, my sons, are dead in an apartment.
In 2017, a heartbreaking and horrific tragedy unfolded in Atlanta when Lamora Williams, a mother of 3, killed her 2 young sons, Jakarter and Keontae. The devastating incident shocked the community and left many struggling to comprehend how a mother could commit such an unspeakable act. Lamora Williams, a 24-year-old mother of 3, called emergency services in a state of panic, saying she had found her 2 young sons dead at home after leaving them with a caregiver. Lamora described a terrible scene to the 911 dispatcher, saying that the stove had fallen onto her youngest son's head, and her other son was found on the floor with what seemed to be severe injuries. She was frantic, asking for help and insisting that she didn't know what had happened. The situation seemed tragic, and the dispatcher could hear the desperation in her voice.
I'm so scared. I don't want to get locked up because I was at work.
Okay, ma'am.
I
understand that you're scared. I completely understand, but I need to get some help out there to you now.
As police arrived and began investigating, things started to look different. The details of the scene raised more questions. The officers found the children's bodies, and some marks seemed like burns. The investigation led to a shocking discovery. The 2 boys had been placed inside a tipped-over oven and left there for an extended period. This heartbreaking revelation changed everything, and the truth about what happened that tragic day began to emerge, leaving everyone in disbelief. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities began to uncover the heartbreaking truth about what had happened. The 2 young boys had died from severe burns, and the evidence suggested that their heads had been deliberately placed inside an oven that had been tipped over. The autopsy provided even more details, showing that the boys had been exposed to extreme heat for a long time before their tragic deaths. The burns they suffered were unlike any natural accident. All the evidence began to point towards Lamora Williams, the boy's mother. What had initially seemed like a tragic accident now looked like something far more sinister. The police and investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened, and the truth about the mother's involvement in such an unimaginable crime slowly became undeniable, leaving everyone stunned and deeply saddened by the outcome.
We know she was in the building somewhere in a back room, but she chose not to appear directly in front of the judge. So you're looking at video from a previous court hearing.
Lamora Williams was arrested and charged with the murders of her 2 sons. In 2024, she was convicted on 14 counts and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. in addition to an extra 35 years for other charges related to the case. Still, she shows no remorse for her actions. She chose to remain silent during the whole trial.
Of concealing a body and one charge of lying to police. Williams is accused of killing her 1-year-old and 2-year-old in October by putting them in a hot oven.
The case left the community in shock and sorrow, struggling to comprehend how a mother could carry out such an unimaginable crime against her children. The heartbreak was felt by all who followed the story, especially as Williams maintained her innocence, claiming mental health issues contributed to her actions.
And it's for them. And show them that we're there for him.
Lamora Williams' senseless violence shattered lives and left loved ones grappling with unimaginable loss. The next case shows how kindness can quickly turn into horror.
I am certain
de que siempre vivirá en nuestros corazones.
That she will always live in our heart.
This is the tragic story of Daniela Taveras, a 21-year-old woman whose life was abruptly cut short by an acquaintance she had just met. Daniela was killed in an unthinkable act of violence after a night out with friends from her gym, a night that was supposed to be full of fun and laughter. Daniela was a friendly, supportive member of a gym in Coral Springs, Florida. She was known for her kindness and easily made friends with everyone around her. One evening, during a gym outing, Daniela noticed that Yvonne Serrano, another gym member, had been drinking heavily. Serrano didn't seem to connect with the others, and Daniela, always the caring person, decided to offer her help. She offered to drive Serrano home after the night out. However, as the evening went on, Serrano's behavior became more intense and agitated. Her drunken state made everyone uncomfortable, and it became clear that she wasn't handling herself well. Despite the unsettling vibe, Daniela, trying to do the right thing, decided to drive Serrano home to make sure she was safe. But that decision would have devastating consequences. Hours later, police discovered Daniela's lifeless body in Serrano's driveway with a gunshot wound to her forehead. The investigation revealed the shocking truth, leaving everyone who knew Daniela in disbelief. What happened that night? What went so wrong?
Reduce the charges from second-degree murder, which would have carried a no-bond hold on it.
Prosecutors told the judge her soon-to-be ex-husband said when Serrano drinks, she blacks out.
The investigation into Daniela's death uncovered unsettling details. Yvonne Serrano, a woman with no criminal history, gave conflicting statements when questioned by the police. She first claimed that she didn't know how Daniela's body ended up in her driveway. Serrano told officers that she had found Daniela's car there when she was leaving for the gym, but her story began to change. As the investigation continued, Serrano admitted that she had been at the bar that night, drinking heavily. She told the police that she had blacked out, making her memory of the night fuzzy. Her story seemed inconsistent, and the authorities began to suspect her involvement. Further investigation revealed troubling evidence in Serrano's home. A gun was found, and there were signs that she had deleted footage from her Ring doorbell camera, which might have captured crucial moments. The discovery of this evidence raised more questions about Serrano's role in Daniela's tragic death. The inconsistencies in Serrano's statements, combined with the physical evidence, left investigators believing she had a part in what happened that fateful night. Daniela's family and friends were left searching for answers, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had stolen Daniela's life.
Or to give the suspect a ride home. She gave her a ride home. The vehicle pulls in the driveway, and at some point the suspect did shoot the victim and kill her.
Serrano was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with evidence. However, prosecutors later reduced the charges to manslaughter with a firearm, a lesser charge that carries a maximum 30-year sentence. Serrano pleaded not guilty, that she's not guilty of her act, leaving Daniela's family and friends devastated by the turn of events. Despite the change in charges, Daniela's mother, Isa, and those who knew Daniela continued to seek justice for her tragic death.
Good morning, Ms. Serrano. You're charged with 2 counts. The first is tampering or fabricating with physical evidence. The second is second-degree murder.
The story of Daniela Taveras' untimely death has left a deep emotional mark on her family and friends. Daniela's mother, Isa, finds herself grappling with anger and frustration, knowing that no matter what happens in court, her daughter will never return.
Ahorita estamos a la espera de la sentencia.
Isabel Taveras, the victim's mother, said she watched while a jury spent more than 2.5 days deliberating before arriving to the guilty verdict.
Yvonne's heinous case leaves everyone in shock and disbelief. The next case exposed shocking cruelty that caused irreversible damage.
Happen without her? Absolutely not. She's the way that they get into the apartment. She never would have opened the door for Michelle Lambert. She helps tackle her. She holds her down while Lambert's stabbing her to death.
In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a woman named Tabitha Buck was sentenced to life in prison for the 1991 murder of 16-year-old Lori Sho. Buck, just 17 years old at the time of the crime, along with her accomplice, Lisa Michelle Lambert, lured Cho's mother out of their apartment and brutally slashed Cho's throat. After nearly 28 years in prison, Tabitha Buck was recently released on parole, which has sparked a lot of debate and emotions. Tabitha Buck's story intertwines with Lori Cho's, which began as a typical tale of small-town life, but ended in an unthinkable tragedy. In the summer of 1991, Lori, a bright and kind teenager, briefly dated Lawrence Butch Youngkin. However, Lori later confided to her mother that Youngkin had harmed her. Their relationship ended, and Youngkin returned to Lisa Michelle Lambert, his pregnant ex-girlfriend. For Lambert, Lori became an obsession. Driven by jealousy, she began harassing Lori, showing up at her workplace and spreading rumors. Lambert's friend, Tabitha Buck, joined in the aggression. Buck physically attacked Lori multiple times, including a violent confrontation at a mall. Lambert's malice turned methodical. With Buck's help, she gathered information about Lori's schedule and obtained her phone number. On December 20th, 1991, Lori was brutally attacked at her home. Her mother, Hazel, had been lured away by a staged phone call. Lori sustained fatal injuries, but managed to identify Lambert as her killer before succumbing. Police arrested Lambert, Buck, and Youngkin that day. Lori's death remains a haunting reminder of how jealousy and hatred can spiral into violence. Tabitha Buck was granted parole after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that life sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. This ruling meant that her sentence was revisited, giving her a chance for release after serving nearly 28 years in prison. Some people believe that everyone deserves a second chance, especially those who were young when they committed their crimes. They feel that Tabitha's time in prison allowed her to change and learn from her mistakes. However, for the families affected by her actions, this decision is difficult to accept. The Cho family, in particular, is left facing old wounds as they remember the brutal crime that took Lori Cho's life.
But a very, very effective one, the odds of my client meeting a personality like that, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1.
Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman shared how painful it has been for victims' families, even though the court was just following the law. The decision raises a complex issue. Should someone who committed a serious crime as a juvenile be given a second chance? While the law sees potential for rehabilitation, the emotional weight for those who have suffered from the crime remains heavy. This situation leaves everyone questioning the balance between justice, healing, and the hope for redemption. Tabitha Buck's parole was granted after she showed good behavior during her time in prison, completed programs to improve herself, and took responsibility for the crime she committed. Despite these positive steps, she must follow strict rules now that she's out. She's not allowed to have contact with anyone who uses substances or with the family of the victim, Lori Cho. She must also attend regular mental health evaluations and, importantly, she can't go back or even visit Lancaster County, where the crime happened. Some people believe that this is a fair chance for Buck to rebuild her life, especially since she was so young when she committed the crime. However, others feel unsure about whether someone who took the life of another person, especially so brutally, should be allowed back into society. For the victim's family and others affected, it's hard to accept that someone who caused so much pain could now be free. It's a complex situation where the law offers a second chance, but it still leaves many with mixed emotions and questions about justice and forgiveness.
Tabitha Buck was 17 years old when she was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal killing of 16-year-old Lori Cho in Lancaster County.
Tabitha Buck is now a free woman, but her release doesn't erase the trauma caused by her actions all those years ago. While she serves her parole under strict conditions, the emotional scars for the Cho family and others affected by the case remain. This case highlights the complexity of juvenile justice and whether it's possible for someone to truly change after committing such a crime.
The surviving family members were told that the sentence was final, and in cases like this, that it was life without parole. And
Tabitha's journey ahead will not only be one of legal challenges, but emotional healing for all involved. The emotional reaction to Buck's release is mixed. For some, it brings hope that people can change, even after making terrible mistakes. For others, it feels like a reminder of the deep pain caused by the loss of a young life. The release of someone who committed such a violent crime against another person is difficult for many to accept, particularly for the victim's family, who are left to process the hurt once again. The actions of these female killers and the chilling choices they made shattered lives and tore families apart, leaving wounds that time can never heal. Their cold courtroom demeanors only deepened the tragedy, reminding us that some crimes leave a darkness that never fades.